pretty good film from 1985. Definitely a cult classic and a B movie, but not in a bad way. This would be one of the better examples of an entertaining B movie. Certainly, it is part of the zombie genre, I guess. It's got a bit of a twist to it, to the reanimation. Who would have guessed from the title of the film? Reanimation of the dead. You have this medical student played by Jeffrey Combs, and he has this weird serum that he's discovered, and injecting it into a corpse brings them not back to life, but just reanimates them, like I say, not quite the way they were when they were still alive. But the plot synopsis, anyway, I'll just read it off the back of the Blu-ray because probably easier to do that. So, one of the most celebrated, outrageous and original horror films of all time, Stuart Gordon's Re-animator is a darkly comic tale that upped the 80s gore ante at a time when blood was already flowing freely. Brilliant, if somewhat deranged, medical student Herbert West, played by Jeffrey Combs, arrives at Miskatonic Medical School and immediately sneers at his professor's outdated views on death. West has his own outlandish theories and has concocted a serum that will bring the dead back to life. Roping in fellow student Dan Kane, played by Bruce Abbott, their shocking experiments work all too well with horrific and very messy results. So that's the general plot synopsis, but let's have a closer look at the thing and also have a bit of a chat about the sequels as well. Okay, so Re-animator is a film that came out in 1985, and it's not one that I'd seen until very recently, to be honest. I was always aware of it, but I didn't really know too much about it and what it was about. I knew it was fairly well liked, but last year in particular I went through a bit of a phase where I was watching a lot of horror movies, just catching up on stuff that I'd heard of but never seen. And this was one that obviously is based on a H.P. Lovecraft story, Herbert West Re-animator, and obviously takes liberties. A lot of H.P. Lovecraft stories, although I haven't actually read this one, but a lot of his stories are quite short and, in a sense, easy to read, although they are quite old. I think they go back to the beginning of the 20th century when he was writing these. But of the ones that I've read quite a few of his stories, and they are really good. This one seems to be a little bit different because a lot of Lovecraft stories are stories like Cthulhu, that kind of thing, and the ones that kind of tie in with that. Obviously, there's a lot of spin-offs as well, that other people have taken that work and kind of elaborated on it. And they usually deal with things like tentacle monsters and the usual kind of concept where it's not that the monster will kill you, like it'll just like stab you and eat you kind of thing, but it's just seeing the monster will drive you crazy. You'll wish that it had killed you because just simply seeing the thing as a human and our level of consciousness and understanding is like way beyond our understanding, and you go crazy having seen it. Whereas this one is more, at least the way that it translates into the movie, is more just zombies. I don't say that in a bad way, but obviously Lovecraft is better known for the usual kind of tentacle monsters. That's not what this delves into. So, like I say, the film itself, the plot is fairly straightforward. You've got these people that are experimenting with this serum that can reanimate the dead back to life. Your classic kind of zombie mode that they're in, but if you compare the zombies in this to something like the George Romero ones from Day of the Dead, they're not quite as lethal. They're a little bit more on the side of being like mental patients. There are like moments in this and the sequels where when you see them, they're pretty much the same as just fairly threatening mental patients. They don't seem to have any kind of like real supernatural power other than the obvious being reanimated back to some form of life. But you'll see them like wearing straitjackets and stuff because they're kind of treated like inmates in an insane asylum, that kind of thing. And obviously there's like blood and stuff coming out of the mouth, and it's a bit nasty. The special effects in this film are really good as well. If you're a fan of practical effects, good old practical effects before the age of CGI, which kind of takes away the heart and soul of things like this, if they go in that route nowadays. Although there are exceptions. This is really kind of that golden age of where practical effects were really starting to look nice, and it was just maybe 10 years before they started really just replacing that with CGI more into the 90s. So things like Evil Dead and obviously your George Romero zombie films, that kind of thing. If you're fans of those, I would definitely suggest watching this film. Now, the cast of the film, like I was saying, Jeffrey Combs really does make this film. I'll talk about the sequels in a little bit. There are 2 sequels. I'm mainly focusing on the original film here. But he's the main character in this. Plays Herbert West, obviously. And he's kind of your kind of quirky Dr. Frankenstein type character. So obviously paying homage to that. And you can tell that the actor's really enjoying the part in this as well. He has some really good lines as well. I don't even know if these are like meant to be like classic lines, but just certain scenes where earlier on in the film he's living with this couple and they find their cat dead in the fridge, and obviously he's going to be experimenting with that and he knows more than he's letting on, but he just says, oh, I found the cat dead, and so I thought I'd put it in the fridge because I didn't want to like shock you or anything. And he says something like, what did you expect me to do, just leave a note? Cat dead, talk later, or details later. So it's just kind of convincing, like when he does that, kind of amusing to watch because he knows more than he's letting on, and obviously the other characters get kind of dragged into the experiments as well. It is one of those kind of things though. If you did have this, you would kind of want to tinker with it because having such a serum would think, well, if we're going to tweak it, I know we're bringing back people now and they're like really like tortured when we bring them back, but maybe we can like do better and actually bring them back to life. And obviously it just goes horribly wrong, as these things usually do in movies like this. So obviously, like I say, the gore in this is, I've seen worse, but I think it was borderline video nasty back in the day. In the UK, that was a phrase that we used to use for films that usually had a lot of heavy censorship to them, or just sometimes just flat out banned because of the pussification, I think, of the UK censorship committees that they had at the time. Obviously, it's a little bit more relaxed nowadays from movies because the standards have kind of slipped, I suppose, by that measure of logic. But yeah, this film I think was fairly close to getting put on the video nasties list, but from what I understand, it wasn't. So obviously, there's. I mean, I don't know if you've not seen the film. I say obviously, but if you have seen the film, but there are some scenes in this that are quite hard hitting, even though they are supposed to be done out of comedy. But I think it's mostly due to the way that they're done and not so much what is done. The main one really is obviously the one where the Barbara Crampton character has all her clothes like torn off and it's full frontal nudity effectively. And nothing particularly much happens to her. She isn't like raped or such, but she's kind of like groped by this like headless zombie at one point, and he's kind of like the lead zombie. It doesn't help that the headless zombie looks a hell of a lot like John Kerry, the the presidential candidate back from 2004. I think he stood against President Bush. Spitting image of John Kerry. It really is quite freaky, to be honest. But yeah, that was a scene in the film that was fairly hard hitting, but it was kind of good in a way because the actress Barbara Crampton, this was something that she was very famous for, but you can tell that she's really kind of going all out in this, and she really does convey like this is somebody who is not only just like naked and being like groped on, but by a headless zombie. So as if like that situation isn't bad enough as it is, but to have this like headless zombie doing it is like pretty freaky. And like I say, it's all done kind of a bit tongue-in-cheek kind of thing. And I think the movie knows its limit, and it gets. I don't want to go through too many major spoilers, but it gets to a point where just when that scene is going to go a little bit too far, it kind of stops and they get interrupted, and something else happens. It kind of saves the day or whatever. So I kind of give it a pass because stuff like that I think can be a little bit too gratuitous. It could have sort of escalated into being just one big titty romp. I know I used that phrase last year, actually. I remember talking about zombie nosh, or I can't remember the name of that film in the US. It was called Zombie Nosh over here anyway. And in that was a classic example of you just had like naked women running around all the time for the sake of it. It wasn't part of the plot. Them being naked didn't necessarily need to be, it just was. Whereas in this, it's kind of essential that she is naked, she's that exposed, because it really is kind of a freaky scene, but it doesn't go too far. It knows its limits and it knows when to stop, and it does. So I don't have a problem with it in that sense, and it's kind of a classic moment in this genre of movies. Barbara Crampton's very well respected, very well liked because of roles like this. I think she's done a lot of horror films and has continued to be in things up till fairly recent times as well, similar things. So she really kind of found her niche, I guess, in this kind of movie and that kind of character. And she's really good in the film as well. Just beside just getting naked, I'm not saying that's the only thing she has to offer. She's a pretty good actress, regardless. And she's also in another one that I'm going to be talking about, but I'll get to that in a moment. There is another guy, Bruce Abbott, who plays kind of opposite the Herbert West character. He's a bit more kind of, because there's the two of them, the two scientists. Let's just call them scientists for the sake of it. They're experimenting with this serum. So you've got Herbert West played by Jeffrey Combs, the main guy, but also Dan Kane played by Bruce Abbott. There's the two of them doing this, and the Dan Kane character is a little bit more your moral voice, whereas Herbert West is very much the scientist. He's very much like, no, we need to do this for science, and doesn't really consider anything else like morality. Whereas Dan Kane, you can kind of see you see the movie through his eyes, really, because you kind of understand, like, this is like not good what we're doing. We need to stop now, but we can't stop because this is a breakthrough. So you can kind of realise, as silly as the movie is, you kind of figure, well, if this was real, it would be so tempting to just experiment more and just try to like tinker with it, maybe see if we can perfect it, as ridiculous as that sounds. I realise I'm not talking too much about the plot because, and spoilers, that kind of thing, because you might not have seen it, but the plot itself is very straightforward, to be honest. But without getting too much into that, because otherwise I'll start rambling. That's basically some of the things to this. The plot is just to do with zombies and experimenting and the usual kind of Dr. Frankenstein scenario. So that's what you're getting from this movie. Now, I'll just very quickly, because it's time's getting on a bit, the Blu-ray of this, it was released a few years ago, and it's a very nice print of the film. You get the Blu-ray. I think it's 2 discs as well, so you get the unrated version, but you also get the integral version. Basically, I think that's just... I've only ever watched the unrated version, but from what I understand, the integral version wasn't endorsed by the director, Stuart Gordon, from what I understand, who passed away earlier this year, I think. But it does have some extra scenes in there that, from what I've heard, kind of take away from the pacing of the movie. But I think next time I watch this, I probably will watch the integral version just out of interest. But it's basically an extended version and has a lot of deleted scenes incorporated back into it, as well as being like the uncensored version or the unrated version. And that is the integral version is exclusive to Blu-ray, so I don't believe that's had a DVD release or anything else. It's been kind of put together more recently. The unrated version is... Well, it's a 4K, but it's not a 4K UHD Blu-ray, but it's a 4K scan, obviously. So it looks really nice, which is important because this film, the colours in this are really nice as well. It's very well filmed in that sense, and the lighting and the way that the colours are kind of put together really give it something that you can kind of, when you think of this film, you visualise it. It leaves a bit of an impression. There's some interviews, and you can watch the extended and deleted scenes. Presumably they're the same ones that are reincorporated into the integral version. You can watch them on here as well separately. So really nice Blu-ray. There are sequels. I'll just talk about it very briefly, very quickly, because obviously we're kind of getting out of the 80s now, because the sequels, there was Bride of Re-animator. It's sometimes known as Re-animator 2. Came out in 1990. And then the Beyond Re-animator film, which I'm not as big a fan of, and that only had Jeffrey Combs in it, it didn't have the other guys in it. That was made in 2003 from memory, and that one's set in prison. The second one pretty much is more of the same as the first one. They're continuing their experiments, that kind of thing. And these are directed by Brian Usner. Both these films are. And if you want to get them, I have this version that came out from, was it Umbrella? Yeah, Umbrella Entertainment. The Bride of Re-animator, so the second film, has some audio issues I've noticed in this. There's like a sort of hissing noise at certain points in it. I don't know if there's actually two versions. There's the R-rated version and there's the uncut version. I seem to remember that both versions have this audio issue. You can get a different version of Bride of Re-animator, which I think has solved that. But to be honest, I didn't mind it too much. Something like that would normally really annoy me. So if I can put up with it, it's probably not a big deal. But then obviously there's Beyond Re-animator as well, which came out in 2003. It lacked a little bit of the magic that the first one, or even the first two, had, to be honest. But it's still pretty good. I've seen way worse. I wouldn't say don't watch it. So definitely watching it, but it is a bit of a step back. And Jeffrey Combs is really good in it as well anyway, so just from that point of view alone, it's worth a watch. The second one, the zombie that, I call him a zombie, but Dr. Carl Hill, the one that looks like John Kerry, the headless guy, if I just get a picture, just so you know who I'm talking about, this guy, he is also in the second one as well, which is really mental. Well, I say that, the concept in general is pretty mental, but they get a bat and sew bat's wings onto the side of his head, or he does it himself, and so you've just got this like head that's flying around with wings, and the special effects on it look a bit tacky, but that's kind of the point. The film knows what it is, so I can't begrudge him for that. I don't think that they were unaware of that, how tacky it looked, but it plays really well in the film. So not much else to say. Like I said, I could ramble on about it, but it's definitely something to watch. It's the classic 80s silly, tongue-in-cheek, slapstick horror movie about zombies, and with a bit of H.P. Lovecraft flair to it as well. If you've read the original story, you'll probably get more out of it, I would imagine, but even if not, it's still a very good film. It stands up, and it's pretty much another classic 80s horror film, which I think is why a lot of us really do love that genre, because not just is it nostalgic, but I think to me it really does seem to be the golden era of those kind of films. Although there have been exceptions today of good ones, but most of the ones that come out today are pretty naff. So I'll leave it there. Tomorrow I'm going to be continuing this and talking about another film that was also directed by the same director as Re-animator, and also was based on H.P. Lovecraft, and also has Jeffrey Combs in it, and that is From Beyond. This is a film, again, I only saw recently for the first time, and, I'll talk about it more in the video, but this one is actually, I prefer this to Re-animator, but I'm going to get into that in the next video. So coming up tomorrow on the channel, Brandix Reviews, check that out, and for now, I will just leave it there and say thank you very much for watching. Right then, just a quick reminder that you can follow us on social media. Obviously the channel exists on YouTube, we've been going strong since 2013, but we also have presence on Facebook as well, where we occasionally post updates and news on there. We also have Instagram. We don't really use it quite as much, but you can always follow us there if you're desperate. But beyond that, Brandix Reviews, news, reviews and retrospectives coming out of the UK.
Son, does Topher have a job? Does Topher go to work? No.